This time is unprecedented. Yeah, we get it. We're living in crazy times. But can we stop and think for a moment what that could possibly mean for us? Are we experiencing a shift in the matrix? Did we all take the blue pill or was it the red? At this point, we might all feel a little better to wake up tomorrow and realize everything was put back in order. But maybe, just maybe, putting it back the way it was isn't the right thing to do anymore. Maybe the snow globe has been turned upside down and shaken for such a time as this. Maybe this is that time in history where history is made. Man, I hope they write it correctly. On this series, aptly named We're Listening, I'm going to chat with men and women of color as they share their personal experiences, struggles, and the lessons they're learning this year, as well as how they all hope we can grow from this. Remember when you were little and you had growing pains? That's the season we're in right now. Let's grow from this, y'all. Let's not waste it. This is We're Listening, and you're listening to the She's Got Gumption podcast. My next guest is a good, wise friend that I inherited from another good, wise friend who called us soul sisters who'd never met. I have to say, I agree. So here's my conversation with Rachelle Jones. Rachelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm over the moon to be here with you, Wendy.
Yes, I feel like this is just a year at least in the making, and I can't wait to hear what you have to share. So thank you so much for having the courage and for being a willing participant. I love that.
Goodness. I love to be invited and to take place in places where I am invited, but maybe there's something that could be helpful to other people, and they don't know unless we have the willingness and to be vulnerable, really. So
yes.
I think it's a big deal. If you're invited, you got to go.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So can you share with everyone just a little bit about yourself, like a 5-minute Cliff Notes version? Who's Rachelle Jones? What does she do? Where in the world are you, Carmen Sandiego?
I
All that
know.
stuff.
That's so funny. Well, I am currently in Santa Clarita, California, where I live. I own a business called the Grief Recovery with Rachelle, where I help people with their emotions. I'm a disabled female veteran, and I co-founded a small home church with a good friend of mine. So I like to be involved in the town, the community. So I do a lot of work with emotions, but also for God.
Yeah. I was reading, I'm finishing up The Healing Path by Dan Allender, and he talks about how he's a psychologist for a living, but he mostly just tries to live out and figure out his purpose for Jesus, right?
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that. Put that on my business card. I'm a coach,
right?
But I'm also just trying to figure out my purpose for Jesus.
Exactly. Isn't that, what did this say? I read this one time and I keep it right here. So since you said that, it reminds me and I have to share it with you. It says the purpose of our life is to discover the purpose is to discover what we're supposed to be doing. The work that we do is to develop it, but the meaning is to give it to others. And so basically to me, at the heart of that, at the core of it, is working for Christ. It's working for Jesus. It's bringing his love into the world, into people's hearts, not just into the world. It's already in the world, but into people's hearts so they know what it is. So no matter what we're doing, whether we feel as though we found our purpose or not, if we're connected to that, that's powerful. That is making a difference right in there. So I always just try to remember, no matter what, if I am making dinner right now,
that's good.
It doesn't seem huge and important, but it's something tender that my kids will be able to reflect on. Hopefully, we never know, but and that's for Christ in my heart, because I see it as this job I was given to raise these humans, these little gifts that he gave me. So it's all for Christ if we choose to see it that way.
And I think about, like, when you're trying to figure out your purpose and you're displaying that to give to somebody else, that's a tangible way that people can connect with him. He's not just some abstract thought old man that lives in the clouds, but like he's you and he's me some days, and others we're just trying to fail our way through life and trying to figure it out. And so I love that. That's so good.
Yeah. We're humans and we need tangible things. We need tangible love, tangible examples. We need pictures to pull from and to see and try to create understanding. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
That's why Jesus told stories and parables,
Mm,
because people
I love
could.
Jesus.
I know
I do.
that guy.
I know. I have 3 love affairs in my life. Jesus, Paul, and my husband.
In what or no, I'm kidding.
I know. Yeah, I'll keep that one for myself. But I always tell them when we're reading, like right now in our little church, we're reading Book of Acts. Oh, I just love him. I always say, I love you too, babe, but oh, I just love Paul. You know, I get all crazy.
I read a book by Sarah Bessey who was like, I just never really liked Paul as a writer. And she was like, apparently you can say that out loud and not be struck by lightning. And I was like, I get that sometimes. He was a real jerk sometimes. You're
Yeah.
like, dang it, Paul.
A
Shut your mouth.
murderer.
Shut your mouth.
Right? But dang, he worked hard for God. And I just love that. He took that good news in. He was beaten nearly to death several times. And he'd get up. I'm not ready to go right now. And he'll leave the next day when it was his choice. Just
I mean, you can,
in him.
let's be real though. You can totally see him as a man and be like, what a great man. But you wouldn't want to be married to that man because he was stubborn as hell.
Yep. I'm with you there.
That's why he never got married.
1,000,000%.
He acts like it was his choice. No woman would take him. Let's be real.
God knew what he was saving the ladies from. He knew. Yeah, I'm with you there 1,000%. Yeah, I'll go with that.
So good. So good. Well, we're in the middle of a series called We're Listening, talking about racial injustice and racial equity. And I wanted to invite you into this conversation because you have a unique perspective, right? We all do, but you especially, you're a Black woman married to a white man who also happens to be in law enforcement. Yes. That might be the trifecta, sister. Let's dive in, okay?
So much of me is spread out and weird.
So tell me a little bit more about you first, and then like your history, your background, where you came from, where you grew up, the way that you were brought up, and then bringing in and coming into an interracial relationship. And then also, I know that when you guys married, he was not in law enforcement. And then
Correct.
Let's talk about that transition too. So start us off. Take us back to the beginning when you were just a little babe. No, I'm kidding.
Clear on back. No, I was born in Southern California, and so I'm going to have a strange perspective too, because this is just how I grew up. So my father is Black, my mom is white. My father was in my life when I was young. He was my babysitter. I would stay the night with him. I knew my family a little bit, but my mom was the one who raised me, my mom and her family, my extended family, my grandmother. And so I grew up in more of a white setting, but I had connection to my Black side.
Sure.
So I didn't know too much that it was different. I remember seeing the pictures on the wall of the big afros when I would be at my dad's house, all the kids growing up and everything. And but I didn't really know that I was different. That was just my dad's house. I was little, and my mom's house. My dad, he wasn't. There was always a underlying discomfort in there, and now I look back and I can see why. There are things that as a child I didn't know for sure, or I didn't have a name for. So when I was young, I just was a kid. As I started to get older, my dad, he wasn't really stable. He wasn't in my life. He was actually more into drugs and different things, and which now as an adult, the reason I do the work I do, what propelled me into that was his suicide. So there was always instability inside of him, like a sadness, but he had an infectious laughter. And I learned music. We watched Soul Train when I was with him, and all those things. So I had this connection in different ways. I would stay at his house and go to church with my aunt, and she'd grease my hair, but my hair is is not the kind that needs grease, the type that they would use. So I just had fun experiences. I learned what a pressing comb was, and I would help my aunt press my cousin's hair. So I got to live both lives a little bit. As I got older, though, he wasn't in my life at all. He was gone. And I didn't, I always thought that was my fault. I always thought it was something I did or something I said. Eventually, I was adopted by a white man. And did start to experience racism around that time. There were people in his family who absolutely hated me because I
Mm.
was half Black. They would send birthday cards to my brother and sister with money, or Christmas with money in the cards, and nothing ever came from me. And so I
Wow.
started to realize, I remember meeting one of those people. I had a new baby brother at the time, and I remember coming into my awareness of, I could feel, it was around 10. They hated me. I could feel it in the room. There was
Mm.
this disgust for me. It was so strange because I was known to be a pretty good kid, kind of like
Yeah.
another help for in the adult world, and so I remember telling myself, I'll just work harder and then they'll
Yep.
love me too. They'll see
Right.
how good I am and they'll love me too. And they never did. So
Mm.
I learned early, around 10, that there were parts of me to be hated, but I still didn't understand why.
Mm.
I did know enough to not talk about being Black in certain situations. And I knew when I was with Black people to not necessarily talk about being white. I basically learned to deny me
Sure.
to fit in. And I learned that young, and I took that forward going early. So it wasn't exactly the best thing to do, but we are survivalists as children, and we learn how to survive for the situation that we're in. So I remember sometimes in middle school, I had a crush on this one boy who happened to be Black, and that wasn't accepted in my new white family. I wasn't allowed to talk about being Black. I wasn't allowed to talk about anybody I liked if they were Black. So I was growing up loved by like my mom's family, but my new family, I knew there was something that I had to hide and pull back from.
Yeah.
So I'm now dividing into several different people. Um, Again, just sad. I feel so sad for that little girl.
Yeah.
So going through school, I learned I'm lighter skinned, and look, and my hair is a little longer. I know you can't see on a podcast, but you and I can see my hair is longer. It's not as tight of a curl. So I can fit in different situations as need be. So I learned that I could be pretty accepted with white people. That wasn't too much of a problem. But Black people hated me. They thought I was white. So I started to learn how to navigate that. They would push me. I grew up in Southern California, and now it's a pretty dangerous place where I grew up, but it was then too. And they would push me. They would, hit me with their backpack as they would going through. And so I actually experienced racism from Black people just as much as white
Mm.
people on
Wow.
both sides. And I've always known that I have to hide based on who I'm with. So I'd learned to say to maybe the Black kids that but I'm Black too. And then, there'd have to be, I'd usually have a cousin somewhere. I didn't really even know we were cousins, but somebody could verify the story. Maybe I had a picture. And so I would be accepted into that group. I was naturally kind of accepted into the white group because, it was just always this divide of having to prove that I'm an okay human. No, no, no,
Mhm.
watch how hard I could work. No, no,
Yeah.
no, I have Black hair. No, 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 but I have white too. But no, no. So it's always this. I
Mm.
lived in this very uncomfortable state.
Dancing constantly. And I'm just hearing the
Oh
word segmented, like you're just these
yeah.
pieces of people. You're never this whole self to anyone.
Oh yeah. And that was really a challenge in my adulthood to I never connected with myself until I found this class after my father's death. So I always say, and I don't know, this sounds crazy, he could not serve me as a human. He could
Right.
not show up emotionally. He couldn't show up physically. He didn't show up financially. He wasn't present. He was not around. He was on drugs most of his
Right.
life. So I knew that in his death, it propelled me into this
Yes.
program that I now teach. that that saved my life. That started to bring Rachelle, all of the many pieces, like you say, the segments, that's a perfect description. It started to bring me in alignment. But I didn't live that way. I lived in the needs, and wherever I felt like the energy, I guess, would be more safe. Not
Mm.
that I was even totally conscious of that. It was just this natural sort of magnet to where it felt more comfortable. I felt more comfortable. So eventually, though, I made it through to high school, not through, and I met the man who would become my husband in high school, and he happened to be white. He pursued me. I was just afraid. I was just a girl who was afraid of life, afraid of always trying to be safe. I moved every year up until ninth grade. I moved 16 times by the time I was 14. So
Wow.
not only was there all of that going on in just my foundational people, my foundation as a whole was always moving and changing. So I never knew safety. He he was just kind and he was safe. And my mom picked up on something because she let me go to the beach with him. I was never even allowed 10 miles past my home, but I was allowed to go to a different town altogether to go to the beach with him. And he was just a safe friend for 2 years. And then eventually, after high school, we joined the Air Force together. I
Aw.
joined for the very noble reason of playing softball, but we joined together, married. We were married at 19. We went into the Air Force. And eventually, after the Air Force, though, and I knew I had situations in the military too. You know, I remember specifically one time an old retired guy was a nurse in the Air Force. I remember him coming in, and there's an older generation of military. It was, I don't want to be too controversial, but it was as though they would go to a different country and find a wife and bring the wife here, and the wife wasn't allowed
Oh,
to
yeah.
speak. It
Yep.
would have been her appointment, but she wasn't allowed to speak.
Right.
And so sometimes I'd have to ask people to leave the room, but as a lower ranking military person, to ask a higher ranking old retired person to leave the room, that's already a disaster, right? I'm
Right.
going to get myself lit on fire. So there would be some times that would happen. Anyway, I remember this one guy, and it was that type of situation, and he's a white man, a white retired man, and he asked me what, I don't remember his exact wording, but something like, well, what nationality am I?
Mm.
And for me, it was always a lighthearted. I remember when I was a kid, I used to say, I remember going to my grandmother. She was my biggest fan, and I was her biggest fan. And I said, Grandmother, I'm gray. Because when you use a black crayon and a white crayon, it makes gray. So I'm gray. So my
Oh
whole
my
life,
gosh.
I've just described myself as gray. Well, I said this to this man when he asked, and he did not seem amused. And he's like, "What did that mean?" He seemed disgusted. And I said, "Well, I'm half black and half white." And he said, "Well, I don't think that's appropriate to say out loud that you're African American. That would be more appropriate, but you should just go with white."
Ooh.
So I learned in the military, shut it down. I don't
Mm.
talk race. I don't talk politics. And I learned then I don't talk God.
Yeah.
I hadn't like studied the Bible and stuff by that time. So I seriously just hid. I was a kill it style worker. I was a good
Yeah.
worker.
Yeah.
But as far as owning who I was, I did not learn that. So my husband and I went through life many years, came to the grief recovery method from my father's suicide, and that's when I started to wake up to the, oh shoot, I got a problem here.
Sure.
I've got years worth of unresolved grief, but also years worth of, so we call it multi-generational pass through, where I was learning all the unhelpful, useless kind of tools and actions to deal with all of that emotional stuff that was going on in my life. But I was also, uh, because all the people who are teaching me, they
Mm.
have their useless stuff that wasn't working for them either. So I'm carrying their trauma. We've heard that before,
Right.
right? Where we pass on trauma. That's what's happening there. So not only did I have the weight of my own experiences, I had some of the weight of how maybe like my mom's life was affecting her that she didn't know how to deal with because it was affecting her, and so she passed it on to me, or my dad, or my all the different people. So I had a lot of that, but I had racism from both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually, we get out of the military. My husband becomes a law enforcement officer, and
Well, let's
so
let's
now here we
what
are.
was that conversation like? Because I remember A few years ago when my husband was like, hey, I think I'm going to quit the oil field and either become a cop or a firefighter. And I was like, you can't become a cop because you're a middle-aged white male.
How did you know that?
How did I know that? Like,
Yeah, I
was
didn't.
that your conversation too?
No, meaning like, well, we were pretty young, and he was similar to me. He just went the way, but he had some awareness. But he would usually just go the way that people were telling him to go very
Yeah.
often. So when we got out of the military, I had prayed since I was a kid. I was sexually abused as a kid. So I knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. If I ever had the opportunity to be a home mom, I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew that I just needed to be there to protect. Even if they
Right.
were at a babysitter that I trusted, they could have a sister or a brother or an uncle come visit,
Yeah.
right? So I knew I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was a conversation we had always had. So when we were coming up to get out of the military, our times coming up, we decided we wanted to start a family. We knew we didn't want to be in the military to start a family. That was not long after 9/11. I knew people who would, if they were both active duty like we were, one would be deployed for 6, 8 months a year, and then they would meet each other in the airport and switch places.
Right.
And I knew that I didn't want that type of life for our child. So when our opportunity came that we could get out, we did. And I think because we had decided that, we had paperwork for it, we were already pregnant at that moment. So my husband went to work for the city where we lived in Northern California. That was sort of, he'd already applied with his agency, but they were on a holding pattern for their hiring. So he went to work with the city. It was clear though that I'd have to go back to work. He couldn't afford our life
Right.
if I was going to be an at-home mom to raise our kid, which he wanted to. So his dad raised him. He's also dead now too, but his dad raised him to think of things like retirement, and how do you get paid for retirement and good insurance and things like that. I actually didn't learn anything about that.
Me neither.
So even today, I still look back in awe. How did he know? We were lost kids for so many years. How on earth he knew to think about this stuff, I have no idea. So anyhow, that's how he chose his agency. He just had to wait for the hiring to open up, and he left for that the day my son turned 6 months old. For me, it wasn't really a question. It was coming from the military. We didn't have the stickers on our car to get through the base. We would get in trouble every single time and just show our ID because we didn't have the stickers. We knew to not talk about that because people hate military people often.
Mm-hmm.
My adopted dad is a Vietnam veteran, so I knew, because he never talked about it, and the
Yeah.
things he did say were, you should be hated in the military. It was the secret brotherhood.
Right. Right.
So we knew uniforms, people don't usually like them. It wasn't too different because of how we'd stepped out of the military. So that wasn't, the safety thing wasn't really an aspect. Um, Family who was in law enforcement would say, you don't do it, you're such a nice guy, it's going to change you. But it wasn't necessarily about safety. It was more about him changing his niceness, which did happen a little bit. He did have to
Sure.
go through some changes, but also who he was helped him in the job. So I remember when he was in training, he was telling me of, people from the beginning, he's had people say how he's racist or he's whatever, but then he knows how to talk in a way that diffuses the situation and they feel seen and valuable and heard.
Yeah.
And so that part wasn't really a conversation. It was just, if that's what you want to do, and that's how you feel that you're going to be able to support our little family, then okay. So I worked just as hard to support him. He left the day my son turned 6 months. For 6 months he was gone.
Wow.
And for training. And so that wasn't necessarily a talk. So when I say, how did you know? I didn't know to be afraid. I didn't know. White guy in a uniform, I did not know that. I definitely do now.
The funny thing is, like, my whole family, all the men and even my mom were firefighters back home on Long Island. And so I grew up in a firefighter family, and like, there's always that like animosity between firefighters and cops. Like, it's a real thing, even me growing up in Houston too, it was like, don't trust the cops, you know? And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm a good kid. I don't get in trouble for anything. But if one pulls up beside me, I'm like, no, like, you don't talk to them, because that's how I was raised too. Like, you don't, bother with them or whatever. So it's such a weird dynamic. So like, it was already ingrained in me to know that's not an option.
That's so funny. That's interesting.
So
Yeah,
weird.
I think we have certain experiences in our childhood for a reason. So my husband and I grew up in really a ghetto. It was not safe. It was East Lancaster,
Oh
So
yeah.
his friends growing up were Black. I had Black friends. I had white friends. I had Black people who were mean to me. I had white people who were mean to me. So we both just learned that it was for us, an individual thing.
Mm,
So when he went into law enforcement, we didn't see it as, oh no, a white guy in a uniform. Because of both of our experiences, it was more of you're just in a uniform. And people
yeah.
don't like cops in general. It wasn't like a race thing in
Right.
in a uniform. So, and I think that's been really helpful for him. He's magnificent in his job. He's also a grief recovery specialist too. But really, it helps in his job, his experiences growing up, because he's able to just be present with people,
Mm,
and they know that, they sense that, they feel that. It's not going to help. Unfortunately, this is our reality. It's not going to help for the person who just sees a uniform and there he's a target way over there and they've never
right.
even interacted. We know that. And I do live with a sense of fear right back here.
Sure.
I do a lot of grief recovery work on that so that that energy doesn't consume me, because it easily could. And has not too long ago, I noticed it really getting loud, and so I had to work on it.
Mm,
Um, so I think that our experiences are just kind of made to propel us in a certain way. It's training for
mm.
part of our purpose, living it out. And so our training didn't include that type of situation, really.
I love what Dr. Dan Allender says. Don't waste your pain.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, when you talked about your dad, he wasn't serving you in life, but in death, like, it's what propelled you to do the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And so, even our traumas that we endure, and everyone has been through a trauma, whether a big T or a little T or a collective bunch of little T's, those are the ones that really bring you down. Um,
Yeah.
to not waste that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that happened, and God hated it for you when it happened, right?
Yeah.
God hated it for you when you were sexually abused. God hated it for you that you had to find out your dad took his own life. He hated that
Yeah.
for you. And then he said, I can do something good with this,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and made it into what you are today and who you'll continue to
100%.
be,
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't
100%.
arrived.
No, gosh, no. No, I'm aware of it. We're in a brand new pattern right now, raising a teen. And let me just tell
I
you,
know our sons are the same
there's
age. Yes.
yes, there's no preparation for this
No,
stuff.
it's
So
the
I'm
worst.
always learning new things. I was being a veteran, right? And so I'm working on some stuff with my veteran status, and I realized, oh shoot, there's a whole nother little box of things emotionally that I haven't dealt with. So I'm always becoming aware of something new that
Mhm.
we're just so used to carrying stuff we numb out, kind of like a
Yeah.
smell or even the phone ringings. We can numb out to that if it's consistent enough.
Right.
And so we do that with emotional pain a lot. Physical pain too. We do that too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Push
I
through pain when we shouldn't be.
I think of like even like physical pain, just like, I've had fibromyalgia for like 5 years now or whatever, and people are like, "So are you getting better? Like, how's your, like," because I have gotten a lot better health-wise and everything. So that's helped. But then I'm like, am I better, or am I just so used to it that I don't feel it anymore?
Maybe
Right?
both.
A little bit of both. And that's the
Yeah.
same for emotional pain and
Yeah.
trauma. I
Yeah.
mean, we're
For
just
sure.
so used to, the body reacts, right? The body reacts first.
Hmm.
And then hopefully you think about it later. Like, why did my body do what it did? Is that like something I should investigate?
Ah.
Why am I crying when that boy dropped his blanket on the ground? I,
Exactly. Exactly. But you know what? That's a evidence of your work that you've done just for yourself in your own life to even have the awareness, the moment of saying, recognizing that you are sad because the boy dropped his blanket over there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would just judge themselves and shoo themselves and minimize
Right.
themselves and shut it down and never actually take notice that, hey, that just hit a nerve or a hot spot for me. What
Yeah.
is that? So that's actually an advanced kind of awareness just in that.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do anything that we're not aware of. So that's really great. Good job.
I always joke, and we've talked about this in our little group, our little house church too, of like, I really do think ignorance is bliss.
I think
Let's
sometimes
be
you're right.
serious. I really do, because I hate how aware of things I am now.
Yes.
I would rather just not know, you know?
Yeah. Yes. I call it all the time a blessing and a curse, right? It's
Yes.
absolutely both.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
I
sure.
think I
I
think when you awaken to like the spiritual eyes too, like you can see, oh, that's the devil at work right there, you
Yeah,
know? Like
yeah.
we're always like looking for God, right? But then like you're also like totally aware that there's this other guy like right on your shoulder, like stabbing you in the eye with a fork, and you're like,
So
oh, okay.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. And sometimes I'm not aware until the fork is in my eye. So
Oh
there's
yeah.
that.
And then you're blind. And you're
Yeah,
like, why does my
exactly.
eye hurt and I can't
And
see?
I've already raged out at everyone in front of me for why'd you throw the fork? You know,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, very human over here.
Oh, so okay. Tell us about let's let's talk about today.
Yeah.
This year, 2020.
Mhm.
I feel like this has been the culmination of years past, right? This is not new. Let's be serious. Racism has
Yeah.
been alive and well and kicking for, I mean, for as well as 40 years, right?
Right.
As well
Hmm.
as I know, 40 years.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit different. And I have to say it's kind of exciting too, because it's like an awakening, is it?
Hmm.
Like an actual left turn, if you will, instead of just kind of swaying to each side. It's something new and exciting that's coming. So what has this year been like for you personally? And what would you say has been your greatest lesson, good or bad?
Mm, my greatest lesson. Well, first, what this has been like for me this 2020, a few things. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but the most important one to me is, yes, this stuff has been going on for a long time, and in part I feel as though the outcry is because it's been years and years and years of
Mm,
experiences, like we talked about, the multi-generational pass through. It's now all of this energy is just hit it head, right?
right.
It's so big. um I think for me, this time is definitely full of sadness, because the hurt is evident. The hurt in the people, the hurt in the communities, the hurt is evident. And what I know for sure, 1,000,000%, is that hurt people hurt people.
Mm,
So sort of like, you know, when the fork is in my eye, I don't always realize to pause and assess. I'm just reacting and responding.
right.
Hurt people, right? And so before you know it, my son's like, but I didn't know. My daughter's like, I didn't know. My husband's like, but I didn't know. And I'm like, yes, you did. And so there's this huge, reaction going on in my home, but really it was from this thing over here, that evil spirit or whatever that put the fork in my eye. But I had this energy and I just let it explode onto everyone. So I'm horribly sad because hurt comes from hurt.
Right.
I'm also excited in some ways, if I could say, but hopeful, because I hope that the outcry, the pain, the reactions are loud enough that people can hear, and people can hear in a way that it will spark change.
Mm,
Change, sure, in different laws and the ways that people are treated, but really and truly, I mean change in each individual heart.
Right. Right.
Waiting in for all of the different reasons. It, I want people to learn how to hear one another, to learn how to hear themselves, to see what kind of ways they've been denying or suppressing their own intuition or their own aches and pains or their own things that have been going on inside of themselves that they were pushing through. I hope that they start to be able to hear themselves and start to take action to heal those things that have been caused. I hope that they start to hear other people and their experiences and hear what, once we deal with our own pain, we can often see other people a little differently, and
Right.
not to give them license, not to say, go ahead, keep on with your ugly behavior and your stupid
Right.
patterns, not for that, but it gives us an insight and it gives us a compassion as well, and it gives us a duty and a way to act. But we
Hmm.
can't really do something different for that person over there until we choose to do it for ourselves over here.
Right. The
And this is
log in your
required
eye.
at for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the speck in the log. Absolutely. So I hope that people hear that, because sadly what I see a lot is a lot of finger pointing.
Right.
And some of that needs to happen. Some of it does.
Right.
People have a right to feel what they feel and they have a right to express it. But as long as I am looking over there for people to do something different, I remain the same.
Ooh, that's good. Put
And
that on a
if
t-shirt.
Oh,
Good.
so it's frustrating because life in general teaches us how to acquire and get and acquire
Hmm.
and get,
And
but
get
it
and get and
doesn't,
get. Yep.
and get and get and get, and it didn't teach us what to do when it changes or we lose a part of it.
Mm.
So people have lost the way that they believe they should be treated and raised. They lost their ideal childhood, their ideal experiences. They've lost that, and they're waking up to, hey, this is lost. But we can't go back in time and suddenly give it back. What we can do is teach people right here how to heal those wounds from what's lost, so that when they go forward, they make different choices. They are aware. They're not going to allow certain things, permit certain things, but also people who are ugly aren't going to do those things if they treat themselves differently. And if someone says, hey, you're not going to treat me that way, it changes the whole thing if we just pause and look inside of ourselves first.
Mm.
Every single one of us needs to do that. As long as I'm waiting for someone else to open the keys to my emotional prison, or
Mm.
open the
Yeah.
cell door to my emotional prison, I will remain trapped.
Mm.
Just like my father, he died. If I'm waiting for him to come back and change the way he was throughout my childhood, I'm
Yeah.
screwed because he's dead.
Right.
If I am waiting for, any person in my life to change their self, I remain trapped and imprisoned. So what I've learned through my work and through my practice for myself, that I also teach others, is really I have the keys to my own emotional prison.
Yeah.
I have the keys to them, and I have the power to open them and heal myself. And until I'm willing to do that, I can't expect anyone else to be different.
Right.
I really can't. It's not right. So I'm hopeful that people will start to connect, like get in alignment with their intuition, their intellect, and their emotions. Get in alignment with yourself, because we need you and your experiences, your pain, your hurt, your sorrow, your whatever, to make the world different.
Yeah.
We need those people who are the oppressors and the hurters. We need them also to get inside of themselves. When we do that, we hear each other. I don't really understand how we're going to make a difference in this world, how we're going to stop these generations of racism and hate, until somebody decides to heal their own wounds and see where that hate is coming from in the first place. Why did we allow different things? Why did we not allow different things? We have to really get to know ourselves and heal. So I'm hopeful. I'm sad. I'm afraid.
Sure.
I'm afraid people are going to miss this moment.
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to say, I can talk about God here, right? So
Sure.
I'm hoping that people can hear that God is like compressing this moment. It's so intense right now.
Right.
Everything is
I agree.
all on fire at the same time. in Southern California, it's literally
I was
on
going to
fire.
say, in Southern California. Yeah.
But everything is so compressed and tight. And I know those are the most uncomfortable moments, but they're also the moment of the most potential to
Yeah.
hear and do something differently. So that's my hope, but it's also my fear that if we miss it, we're just going to enter into how many more years of this hate and discord, and it's sad and scary and vulnerable.
I love that you said it's just like there's this window, right?
Yeah.
This little compressed time of like all of this is happening this year. It has happened for a reason, right? It was predetermined, or you know, like God already knows the outcome, the story, like he knows what's going to happen next year, the year before, 10 years from now. And we have this moment in time, and to waste it would just be like the worst thing. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think of little moments that even that we've experienced in our lifetime where it was like, oh, that was a moment, right? Like I think of how united the nation became after 9/11, right? And I would like almost miss that, like just a little bit. And I've just been praying just over the last year, we need something to unite us. And then this year hit and I was like, this is not it. What are you doing, man? Like, this is not helping.
Not what I thought it would be.
Right. And I thought, you know, we're going to have another war or something, like something.
Right?
Because you never know. And and then like when I started to think about it more, especially during like quarantining and stuff like that, I was like, maybe this is it. But it's one of those things that God does where it's like, look at this, not what you think it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Which I think is better, because we don't know the workings of God, right? His ways are so far above ours. So I think it's important that it doesn't look the way we expected it to look, because there's something
human.
about, well, exactly. That's totally right. We'd lose our dependence on our need to look to God for more ideas and clarity and, you know, what do we do next? But also, I think that it's good to be unpredictable sometimes. It's good for us to be shooken up a little bit, because we want to cling to what's comfortable and familiar, but there's no change in comfortable and familiar.
Right.
Ever. We have to get a little uncomfortable to create change, but we've learned to cling to what's comfortable and familiar. So it's this conflict between the need to change and the, but I feel kind of afraid of that.
Isn't that like I was texting with my friend earlier. I'm like, isn't that the American way? Let's get really comfortable. And like, that's it. Like, let's just not rock the boat or be uncomfortable. I don't know about you, but like in Texas, especially, I was talking with someone just the other day about Southern politeness, and like, I have a line. I have a threshold. Okay. There's Southern politeness and stupidity. And sometimes they go hand in hand, and I just can't do it. Like I've lived down here for most of my life, but like the New York is so ingrained in me that like you ask me my opinion on something, I'm going to tell you whether you like it or not. So there's that threshold of comfortability. Is that a word?
Works for me.
Sure. We'll go with that. And then, and politeness. And it's not serving anybody.
Yeah.
We can't just be nice to other people and that be the cure for things. Now, is kindness important? Sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between kindness and niceness. Niceness is saying something. Kindness is doing something. It's the action.
I agree. I'm a big fan of action. So I grew up that's how I describe my childhood a lot, is I learned that if you were nice, then good things happen. If you're just nice, if you spoke nicely and you said nice things and you left people feeling nice, then your life will be okay. And that wasn't the truth. I mean, I was abandoned by dad number one, abandoned by dad number two. I did have dad number three, but you know, there's challenge and hardship in that. There was sexual abuse a few different times in my life. My marriage has been crazy, wildly difficult. And we never did argue, by the way. We dated for 2 years. We'd never had one argument, never one disagreement. And that's what, the romance novels tell you. Oh, that you should be best friends. Well, we were. But that didn't set us up for a life of easy.
No.
that
No.
that just set us up for a life of being human. So nice, I learned. And that was a loss too. That was a loss of everything I knew.
Mm,
Everything I knew was if you were nice, then you'll be okay. Well, that
yeah.
didn't work.
A
So that
loss
was a
of your
loss of
like
everything I understood.
your ideology
For
of
sure.
how you think the world works. It's like
Yes.
that moment. I remember the moment when I learned that my mother was a human being. I
Ah.
was like 23 or 24 and I was pregnant with my first child and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she does not have her life together." Like, how am I supposed to pretend like I have my life together if she's older than me and she has her life together? And I remember like since then I mean it's been 15 years now, and I'm just like when I come across people that have these challenges with their parents that like they're like, oh, I just like my dad is, present moment, most people are like, oh my gosh, I never knew my dad was a racist. I'm like, you never knew
Oh,
your dad was
shoot.
human. Like, yes, exactly. People have flaws. And like,
Yeah.
it's the worst moment when you realize that your parents are human beings. You
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
you just realize
It's
that
almost
really,
like a betrayal.
yeah. Your whole ideology, your whole world goes out the window. You're like, oh crap. Like, how
Like,
is the world is upside down. Up is
ah,
down, down is up.
so true. So, so true. And so I do try to talk with my kids differently about, just letting them see that I'm easy to say, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Let's look it up. I don't have any idea. Let's look it up.
Yeah.
Because I want them to know that just because I've reached this adult age
Right.
did not come with automatic degrees and stuff to become all knowing of life.
Right.
Absolutely not. And going along with like my husband being in law enforcement and the state of the world, and my kids are biracial too, aren't they? So letting them know what's happening in the world without shoving it down their throat
Sure.
and being really careful. The news does come from me
Right.
versus a news channel that's trying to shape their belief system. No, no, no. You don't get to shape my kids' belief system. I'm going to be
Right.
in charge of that. That's why I'm a
Right.
stay-at-home mom in the first place. So, so I want them to know what is real, but also being a biracial kid, I feel sad and scared for them too.
Sure.
They're going to have to go through a lot of that identity crisis that I had to go through in different ways. Um, so it's just a sad, scary world. So I worry for them. I worry for them being law enforcement kids, you know, or kids of a law enforcement family. I worry for them for being biracial. It just like these are big issues right now, and
Yeah.
it's just a scary time. It's an interesting time because there's so much unknown. We don't know, is this actually going to take people are becoming more aware, but are they doing necessary change? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
And
Or are they
so
just
there's a lot
posting
of
things on
unknown
social media?
and uncertainty. Right. We don't save the world. It's good. It's helpful to put some information out there and it's helpful, but that's not your action. That
Right.
doesn't erase what we need to be doing in our heart, in our home, in our life. It's an action work that we need to be doing. So social media is great, but I do think it gets in the way of people taking actual steps of
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just sometimes it's like, well, we'll see. We'll keep doing our work and we'll keep spreading the seeds, but then we'll see what actually comes of it. So
Yeah.
I pray every second that my guy leaves the door, and I pray until he gets back in, and I give thanks every day that he comes in because at any given day he may not.
So wrapping up our conversation, what is one last thing that you would want people to know
About the situation.
about you, your family, and I guess like just the advice that you would give that you would want to leave people off with?
Okay. Well, it kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. I never want people to get away from how they're truly feeling because that's real and valuable and important. But I also want people to realize that how they're feeling can adjust with hard work, with actual intentional work. Um, that no matter what situation they're in, it's not just clear cut and dry, is it? There's
Right.
never this person's all bad and this person's all good. There's no such thing.
Right.
There's no such thing as a pure devil human and a pure evil human. And it could seem that way, but it's not actually true.
Right.
So realizing, then taking that to ourselves, that it always starts in ourselves, taking ownership for our feelings, the way we feel, the way we hear, the way we think, taking ownership for that, looking at it, examining it, taking ownership for, even if there's one thing that we could have said or done differently, then there's a piece of grief inside of us. So there's a reason to sit and look inside of your heart, that it's not all just other people's fault. We, until we find ownership, we've learned to point fingers.
Yeah.
Until we learn to take ownership for what's going on inside of us, we can't actually make a difference, no matter what it is. So I guess my biggest thing is always find yourself valuable enough to do some heart work.
Do the work, yeah.
Find yourself valuable enough to see what's happened in your life. Have someone sit with you and look through it and walk through your own story and see who you really are before you point fingers and expect everyone else to change. That's always the first thing. And then just connect, for the law enforcement side of it, everyone's human. Everyone's human. And that does not give license to be ugly. But it should give us a pause to say, let me look deeper. That person has a story. That person has a family. They're not just how they look.
Right.
I'm not how I look. I'm often considered Hispanic or something. People speak Spanish to me everywhere I go. So we're so used to seeing people and just making some rash decision.
Right.
For my husband, they don't see that he's actually an emotional support specialist, that he actually cares for people and he loves them, and he works with their heart. We work with disadvantaged kids here in the community through the sheriff's department. We do a lot of work for people in their various situations, to care for their heart, to let them know as humans they're valuable. And so I would just ask people to see themselves as valuable, but then pause and see the human next to them as valuable too, and understand that they have a story too, and that whatever they're doing is coming from a source. Look at it. See where it's coming from. See people as humans worthy of hearing.
Yeah.
But we can't see others worthy of hearing unless we're willing to hear ourselves too. So I guess my hope is always that people will just stop and do their heart work.
I love that. I love that. It is, there's so much to be done, right?
So much to be done.
It's the harvest is plenty, the workers are few, right? And I always think about I only heard this a few years ago, but it was, everyone you meet is the image of God. Everyone
it's true. Yep.
is made in the image of God. So like even today, I was driving my son to his appointment this morning, and there was a man wandering around like this one area of town that's kind of known to be like a little uppity, but he was like walking into the center of the street and then walking back, and then standing in the center of the street and walking back.
Oof.
And I just like, where most people be like, oh, he's just a crazy homeless person. He might be someone that has a mental illness. Or maybe he's dehydrated because it's been 100 degrees, or something. Something else is going. He's not just a crazy man that you should like lock your door as soon as he walks by. I mean, maybe your gut is telling you lock your door because this man's walking by. But like, he has this whole story, and like, I just instantly want to be like, hey man, what's going on with you today? Like, do I need to call, someone to come and pick you up? Are you lost? Do you need an IV? What? I want to know people's stories. And I think if people had that same curiosity about one another, I mean, I think the world would be a better place, because we'd be curious about each other. But I think first we have to know our own story before we can really honestly be curious about anyone else.
I think you're totally right.
That's exactly what the heart work is, knowing your story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And if you don't know what to do first, just be quiet and ask someone to give you a hug. If you don't
Yes.
know what to do, just be quiet. Start
Say
listening.
nothing.
You know,
Yes.
be a heart with ears. You've got two ears and one mouth, so use
Yeah.
your ears more than you use your mouth. And if you don't know what to say for yourself, you don't know what to say for another person, be quiet. And if you're really just wanting to up that game, offer them a hug
Yeah.
and be quiet. That's
I'm a hugger.
powerful. Speaking of the homeless man, there's so many people I work with who are widowed or just single or in some kind of hardship, and so often I hug. It's part of my class. It's a part of it. It's ingrained into it, and it's a
Nice.
very specific type of hug. And I teach people exactly how to hug in a way that's effective emotionally. And it seems so simple, but it's true. Anyway, people say that all the time. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize I haven't been hugged in a long time.
Yeah.
You want to watch someone's energy just go down a little bit? Maybe you're not ready to do your own hard work and you want to just help someone else, then be quiet, listen to them, and offer them a hug.
Yes. The
Promise you.
20-second hug
Yes.
releases anxiety. I do this with my son every
Heart
day.
to heart.
Yep.
Firm, still,
20-second
tight,
hug.
and quiet. It's important. So, you don't always know what to do. What does hard work mean? If you don't know, that's okay. Call
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, she'll tell you.
Yeah.
But be quiet. See someone valuable enough to just be quiet and listen to them. And if you want to up your game, give them a hug. And that's always going to be a little bit special, different.
I love
So,
it. Thank you
yeah,
so much, Rachelle. You're
thank
just,
you.
I could talk to you for hours, but like we
I
have
really could.
lives and children around
I
here
know.
somewhere. Uh,
It's true.
can
I
you
think.
give can you give people your information so if they want to start the heart work, where can they find
Oh,
you? Give them all the
yeah.
details because you
Oh,
are
Wendy,
just
thank you.
a wealth of wisdom and people need to know you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. The easiest way to find me is at my website, Grief Recovery with Rachelle. It's RACHELLE, griefrecoverywithrachelle.com. Or even if you don't want to work with me specifically, the griefrecoverymethod.com is just as easy. Find a different specialist who can work with you. But 661-200-9489 is also a really easy way to connect with me. Because that's my whole being, is just to be present for people. So whatever route they choose, just put in the time, find yourself valuable enough to do the work. But yeah, that's the easiest. I'm on all the social medias and all the whatever. You type in Rachelle Jones grief, you'll find me somewhere.
You guys know I'm all about story and I'm all about a great conversation. And I feel like this one really hit the nail on the head. Let me know about your experiences as well. I would love to hear feedback from you. What did you think about Rachelle's story? I mean, did you identify with it? Was it something that was eye-opening? I want to hear all of it. She's got gumptionshow@gmail.com. Be sure to email me. And if you want to share your story on this podcast, this series, or you just want to share your story, I am open to it. So email me then too. You guys, another one in the series and more are coming. So be safe out there, be wise, and let's change the world. Man, if anyone can do it, it's us. Okay? We can do this. Bye, guys.